amarrado, mi cuerpo ya no sabe sanar. Voy perdido, el mapa no logró encontrar. Sin sentido, mi corazón ya no sabe llorar. El murmullo del recuerdo, los ancestros y sus cantos, historias de resistencia en tambores han marcado, en pueblos de razas negras que el Estado ha ignorado. Las vidas negras importan, en solidaridad gritamos. Sienten el calor de la sangre derramada. Escuchar las protestas del pueblo en llamas. Abolir la policía, la migra y fuerzas armadas. Abolir las cárceles, la esclavitud modernizada. Salgamos a protestar. Imagine un mundo sin policía y sin la migra. Salgamos a protestar. Imagine un mundo sin policía y sin la migra. Salgamos a protestar. Imagine un mundo sin policía y sin la migra. Salgamos a protestar. Imagine un mundo sin policía y sin la migra. Las vidas negras son preciosas, las vidas negras son preciosas, las vidas negras son preciosas, las vidas son.
Today is Tuesday, December 15th.
Very refreshing, yeah.
Good evening, and welcome to the launch of a revitalized DC chapter of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. I'm Lucy Murphy, a member of the Josephine Butler Paul Robeson Club and the Claudia Jones School for Political Education. Before I introduce the moderator, Dr. Marsha Coleman Adebayo, let me say a few words about the Alliance. The National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression grew out of the committees which were formed to free Angela Davis. In August of 1970, Angela Davis was charged for the death of a California judge, even though she was not present at the scene of the shooting. Sensing the injustice of this charge, by February 1971, more than 200 local committees in the United States and 67 in foreign countries worked to free Angela Davis from prison. Following a national and global campaign on June 4th, 1972, their efforts resulted in a verdict of innocence and her release from prison. After Angela Davis was freed, the committees decided to work on the cases of other prisoners who had been charged and railroaded due to their speaking, writing, and community organizing activities. At a convention in May of 1973, the Free Angela committees came together to found the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. The purpose of the alliance is to protect and defend the movement for human rights against the continuing assault by the racist, misogynist, classist, transphobic, and homophobic system. With the illness and death of many of the founding members, the Alliance experienced a decline over the years. However, the chapter in Chicago held firm and in 2019 put out a call to rebuild the national organization. Over 1,000 anti-racist activists from all over the country met in November of 2019 in Chicago. At that meeting, those in attendance agreed to refound the National Alliance and elect Frank Chapman of Chicago to lead the organization. Members of Pan-African Community Action and the DC Communist Party were there. When we came back to DC, we held meetings and decided to form a local chapter, which we are launching tonight. The National Alliance and its regional chapters continue to struggle for justice with a focus on the following goals: establishing civilian control of police, freeing political prisoners and the innocent, stopping all police torture of suspects, abolishing the death penalty, abolishing life without the possibility of parole, fighting racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, immigrant bashing, religious discrimination, and all other forms of bigotry, defending the rights of working people and their labor unions, defending civil liberties, exposing the prison industrial complex and the war on drugs as the root of the new Jim Crow and the cradle to prison pipeline for people of color, securing health care for prisoners, establishing civilian control of police, freeing political prisoners and the innocent, supporting affirmative action, exposing systemic racism. I will introduce our moderator for the evening. And before our moderator takes over, I will introduce Quisha Bradley, who will, and our moderator for the evening, and then Quisha. Dr. Marsha Coleman Adebayo is the author of the Pulitzer Prize nominated No Fear, a whistleblower's triumph over corruption and retaliation at the EPA. She worked at the EPA for 18 years and blew the whistle on a U.S. multinational corporation that endangered South African vanadium mine workers. Marsha's successful lawsuit led to the introduction and passage of the first civil rights and whistleblower law of the 21st century, the Notification of Federal Employees Anti-Discrimination and Retaliation Act of 2002, the No Fear Act. Marsha was inducted into the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame, March 2017. Currently, she is working to stop the Housing Opportunities Commission and the Bethesda Self-Storage Company and the 1784 Holdings from its continued desecration of Moses African Cemetery in Bethesda, Maryland. And now let me introduce Sister Quisha Bradley, who will introduce our cultural artists for the evening. Quisha has played a key role in bringing this chapter together. Quisha Bradley is a global public health and new business development leader with over 14 years experience. Her expertise is in designing, developing, managing, and implementing a diverse range of programs for international and national NGOs. She is also an accomplished grant and proposal writer, effective capacity building.
Sorry, Miss Lucy, we could cut that. I revised the bio to make it shorter. We could skip to just organizer to Paca. I'm sorry. Just for the sake.
Well, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so now I will turn it over to the fabulous Quisha Bradley, who will introduce our artist for the evening.
Peace, everybody, and thank you so much, Miss Lucy. You're the best. I do want to lift up a comment from Dante in the chat. If anyone who is joining us today is in need of ASL interpreter, you should have the ability to pin that to your screen. So if you're having any issues, feel free to direct message either myself or Dante. And there should be 3 dots next to your name, I guess. Okay. Okay, with that and without further ado, thank you again, Miss Lucy. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Happy to see we have 105 participants. All right. So with that, I would like to introduce my brother, my comrade, Doc Matta. Doc Matta is a 25-year-old lyricist born and raised in Southeast DC. Doc Matta is a member of the Tribes Collective. Tribe stands for Taking Risks, Investing in Indigenous Black Experiences. The musical group recently launched a fundraising initiative for grassroots organizations in the African diaspora. Doc Matta will be releasing his currently unentitled debut album in February 2021. The album will be a neo-soul inspired ode to Black women. With that, I'd like to welcome my comrade and turn the floor over to him.
Peace. Thank you, Quisha. I am actually going to do a spoken word piece. That's cool with everyone. Thank you for that wonderful bio. The spoken word piece is called We. Start it up. We. Weary-eyed we stand, withholding wild, idle visions of liberation. We, the people. No, we, the forgotten, downtrodden, heavily pigmented bodies of Western empires, written historical margins despite the pivotal roles we played. Oh yes, we, the ones who maintained shackled head to foot, mouth to anus in a stitch of bowel and anguish, stacked and mandated as cargo for white Western evils, who forgot the evils of the origins of our anti-American experience. For honestly, if the American dream truly came with its apple pie and cream, and it was true, we'd be heirs to over 1 billion, 1%ers of talent. Oh yes, we, the shareholders of the talent that brought West African rights to the coastal shorelines of the Carolinas. The indigo insight in our genes to make genes fashionably dance to the music you first loved to hate and now hate to love. We must be chosen people, how we make nothing in a wine. Pain peeled, pairing and painting, portraits of poltergeist panting at the bottoms of the Atlantic. From overboard we wept, from underseas we can't breathe in the spirits of those who left. Fallen martyrs, Tubmans, Turners, Toussaints to Eric Garners, we still fought all your wars, from revolutionary to civil, even soldiers within the Confederacy to world wars to the Middle East, violent tours, killing those with similar colonized imperial experiences, because we have yet to learn. Concerted loyalties to a patriarchal system which ejaculates at the sight of collective Black misery, even in our success, because although the trials and tribulations of million moons manifested, we engage success of Ecclesiastes proportion. Wisdom embodied enchanted environments of Black success. We like W.E.B. Du Bois, we like the weaving spider that inspired the cloth of the Santis Kente, which we adopted rather than appropriated during time of diasporic unity, that adopted for our success. For we got women who lead in education amongst the nation, for we know we need change like those before us. We contemplate the dangers of privatization, capital punishment, misappropriated Black bodies, which is why we fear we are we's sirens more violent as we lynched in the pen and beaten outside of it due to an engineered lynch pit system fastened together to make killing niggas and making them necros the latest fashion. We transition ritualistic libations from bowls to 40 ounces of Old English on curbsides for our fallen brothers, mothers, fathers, sisters, and cousins who ain't make it home. And yet, and still, we are everything. We are ether, carbon-based tranquility when we find peace. Go-go swinging in the midst of wavering evacuation in Southeast. And yet still, we are eloped to the universe, for we are galactic being walking Earths who have forgotten that we are revolution, and revolution is we, standing weary-eyed, gaining fragmented traction and wild, idle visions of liberation. Welcome to the vanguard. Thank you.
I see some Southeast people in the chat. You better go off mute, represent. Woo! Thank you so much, Doc Matter. With that, I'll turn it over to the next person.
Good. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Hi, Ashe, Sisters Lucy and Sister Quisha. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Dark Matter, that was absolutely amazing. That was incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you. The goal of this program is to launch the DMV chapter of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And we hope that many of you will consider joining. As Sister Lucy said earlier, the National Alliance was founded in 1973 in Chicago, initially to support the Free Angela Davis movement and to organize around defeating structural white supremacy in order to stop the global genocide of African people. The military occupation of our community by what is called the police force today has its genesis in the slave patrols. This was the vigilante white military force that attempted to apprehend African people who had the courage to escape European barbarism that European historians like to call slavery. However, this military occupation would be impossible without buy-in from the dominant society. In 1680, the Virginia Assembly, understanding this reality, enacted a law which prevented Black people, quote, from raising a hand to any white person. This law essentially codified and defined white skin privilege. This meant regardless of whether you were poor or rich, your white skin provided the privilege to abuse, incarcerate, murder, rape Black people with impunity. It is one of the bonds that unite white people regardless of their class. The state of Maryland incarcerates more Black men than any other state in the United States. We incarcerate here in Maryland more people, more Black men than Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. 70% of all the prisoners in Maryland are Black, while Black Marylanders only comprise 12.7% of the 20.7% of the population. So we formed the DMV chapter of the National Alliance during a state of emergency. So first, allow me to introduce Frank Chapman. Frank Chapman was wrongfully convicted of murder and armed robbery in 1961 and sentenced to life and 50 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. He immediately became involved in human rights struggles within the prison, met people in the freedom movement while in prison, and became involved in legal struggles in federal courts to desegregate the Missouri state prison system. In 1971, they won their legal claims and the US District Court ordered the prison to desegregate. As a result of this organizing while in prison and becoming a communist, comrades outside organized a defense committee for Chapman to win his freedom. He came home in the wake of the formation of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression in 1973, which developed from the National United Committee to Free Angela Davis and all political prisoners. Chapman was paroled in 1976 and granted executive clemency in 1981. Out of a profound sense of gratitude, he joined the NAARPR. Recently, Chapman is a field organizer and educational director for the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and executive director of the newly refounded NAARPR. In Chicago, the CAARPR has been effectively building a mass campaign for justice for survivors of police violence. To this end, they fought for the conviction of killer cops like Jason Van Dyke, who murdered 17-year-old Laquan McDonald, and for the reenactment of an ordinance that will establish an all-elected civilian police accountability council. CAARPR sees this ordinance as a pathway to community control of the police. In the citywide elections just held in Chicago in 2019, they gained 17 CPAC candidates being elected to the city council. This has altered the balance of forces in Chicago to favor the movement for community control of the police. Chapman just published his memoir, The Damned Don't Cry, Pages from the Life of a Black Prisoner and Memoirs of an Organizer, which was recently reviewed by the Chicago Defender. Wow. It is my pleasure, it is my honor to introduce Frank Chapman. Brother Chapman, you have the floor.
Thank you. Wow, that's quite an introduction. Well, you almost said everything that I was going to say. So thanks for leaving me something to talk about. No, that was a great introduction. I'm telling you, you covered the waterfront. So since everybody has probably already read, I know you read it, my paper on historical roots of of the struggle for community control of police. I'm not going to go through a lot of that. I'm just going to, zero in on some salient points that I think are really pertinent to the present crisis that we're in and how we're conducting the struggle. First of all, I want to make it clear because there's a lot of people who are not clear about this. Some of our friends here in Chicago in the defund movement have been. And they are our friends here in Chicago. That we're not working against each other, but there are still some elements within that movement that are confused about the question of community control of the police. But nobody in the Black liberation movement and nobody in the Black community has ever been confused about this question ever. I think no matter how far back you can go back to the Negro World of Marcus Garvey. You can go back to the Black Reconstruction era. You can come through the 50s with the Nation of Islam. Every segment of the Black liberation movement has always called in one form or another for community control of the police, because that's a fundamental demand of our movement. And the reason why it's a fundamental demand of our movement is because we're not just a movement for equality. We're not just a movement to get more enjoyment or get a buy-in to the privileges of bourgeois democracy. We're also a movement for national liberation. We're also a movement for the liberation of our people, which means we have viewed ourselves since the 1830s as an oppressed nation within this nation. And along with that comes political demands. And one of those, and the principal political demand is the right to self-determination. So, community control of the police has to be seen within that context, within the context of the Black liberation movement, because, as you said, it's a pathway. And we don't want to have any illusions about that. Community control of the police is not the revolution, but it's a pathway to the struggle for Black liberation, which is clearly and obviously the revolution that we seek you know, because we don't think anything else is possible in this country in terms of moving towards a more democratic society. That we don't think it could happen without the Black liberation movement. That has to be the pathway to all revolutionary struggles taking place upon this continent. You know, that's that's my view. Now, having said that, we're not trying to impose our view up on everybody else in the movement. We don't have a banner over our entrance door that says all who enter here must bow down before what we think. You know, no, we say all who enter here must join us in united action against the oppressor, and that means that we are seeking unity of ideas, unity of action, not unity of ideas. That's the basic concept of a united front, you know, and that's what the alliance is. That's what it's been from its beginning. When we started out in 1973, we had communists, socialists, you know, queer people, indigenous people, all in our movement. That's how we started out, you know, and we had people who were full-blown revolutionaries, and we had people who were social democrats in our movement. So what brought us together was a united fight against racist and political repression. That's what brought us together. And so, you know, we still operate according to those principles. That's why I'm bringing them up here. You know, the struggle for community control of the police is a decisive strategic tactic for curtailing and ending the violent, racist-driven repression of the Black liberation movement, That's why it was the Panthers who first raised this clearly and unequivocally in the latter part of the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, because they were responding to murderous repression against their movement, against our movement, and so this tactic is a very important strategic tactic. That's why when Bobby Seale talked about it, he says the point of community control of the police is that those people living in those neighborhoods will actually do the hiring and the firing of the patrolmen who patrol the area. Community control of the police is one of the most functional and most necessary programs to make all the other programs work. That's why we say it's decisive. You know, we are creating organizing space for our people to carry on the struggle, to carry on the revolutionary struggle, to carry on the struggle for Black liberation by fighting for and gaining community control of the police. You know, so I wanted to just make that clear. Now we have learned over 40 years, over 40 years of history, that the struggle for community control of the police requires more than electing a politician to any to any office, local, state, or federal. It also requires more than getting laws passed. Getting CPAC passed, you know, is not a magic wand. Getting CPAC passed is creating a situation for the self-empowerment of our people. You know, we got to be careful about that word empowerment. If you're asking the system to empower you to do something that's going to undermine the system, then you know you're playing games with yourself. You know, that has to be a self-empowerment. You know, so we're not asking the system for anything. We're demanding. You know, we're demanding our inalienable democratic right to say who polices our communities and how our communities are policed. So it's very important to understand that. It's been 8 years since we started the campaign here in Chicago for CPAC. CPAC meaning a campaign for an all-elected civilian police accountability council. Since that time, we've reached out to hundreds of thousands in the greater Chicago area, asking them to support CPAC. We've done this through petitioning, through public forums, through people's hearings on police crimes and torture, and through mass demonstrations. We've been in a lot of them. And so what we have done in the process is we have built up a broad base of community support. Historically, we started in 2012 in a small area in Inglewood in Chicago, where only 150 people gathered to launch this movement. Now we would need a whole auditorium. Well, we would need several auditoriums to get all of the people in there that are in this movement. Since then, our movement has grown to tens of thousands of people. We have over 50,000 people that have signed on to CPAC in the streets. Through our petitions, through our postcard campaigns to city alder people. We have 176,000 people that voted for CPAC during the last city council elections. Well, they voted for candidates who had CPAC as a part of their platform. So we have really built a mass movement. It's not just in our imagination or in our dreams that this is happening. We have built a mass movement, and we have a number of organizations that have partnered with us in building that movement, like Black Lives Matter Chicago, Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation, which is also known as SOUL, Innocent Demands Justice, which is basically a Puerto Rican-based organization, the Filipino Alliance, and youth organizations like Anak Bayan, the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, United Working Families, Workers Center for Race and Justice, Centros Sin Fronteras, that's Without Borders, Democratic Socialists of America, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and others. Through petitioning, canvassing, and tabling in the neighborhoods, we have mobilized and organized over 1,000 volunteers. Again, these are people that we have names, addresses, phone numbers, email that we're in touch with on a regular basis. And we've also have in our ranks the Chicago Teachers Union, the Service Employees International Union, Jobs with Justice, NAACP Southside, Church of the Living God, Trinity United Church of Christ, and other faith-based organizations. So we are an on-the-ground movement with troops. In this precise moment of history, the city of Chicago is forced to face the fact that the mayor has failed, the city council has failed, and sad to say, our state's attorney, who we basically put in office for the last couple of times, the first Black state's attorney we've had almost ever, has also failed. So how are we going to deal with this? We're going to have to continue to build a mass movement. We're going to have to continue to put pressure on those in power. And we say that we don't push politicians. We push issues. So we're not tied to the faith of any politician, because we understand how this system really works. We understand how corruption works. So we can't endorse, support, and push politicians as a movement. Our movement doesn't do that. What we do is we push the issue, and we'll ask a politician to support the issue. And when they ask us, well, will you also endorse us? We say no. We won't endorse you. Why should I support you? Well, if you believe in justice, that's why you should support it. Not because you're looking at us for us to scratch your back. So believe it or not, that tactic has been successful with us so far, because they see that we mean what we say and we say what we mean. But based on these accomplishments, in building a mass movement, we called for a national conference last year to be founded the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. That conference, as said in the introduction, that conference was convened in Chicago, November 22nd to the 24th, and people, 1,200 people, representing 150 organizations, came from 101 cities and 28 states. So when the May 2020 rebellion, sparked by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others broke out, we were ready as a national organization to call for united action, and we did. And as a result, on May 30th, 2020, we put over 30,000 people in the streets here in Chicago and over 100,000 in 22 cities nationwide. Now we have, National Alliance budding centers of resistance in places like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Dallas, Springfield, Tallahassee, Florida, Baltimore, New York City, Western Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, and also we have some budding chapters coming up in Gary, Indiana, and South Bend, Indiana. So we've made the movement for community control of the police a movement to be reckoned with. We've pushed this issue all the way to the national presidential debates. When Biden and Trump were debating, this did come up. All our past history brings us to this moment where we have organized the broadest, deepest coalition of progressive democratic forces capable of defeating the powers that be and winning community control of the police here in Chicago. Now we have CPAC in the city council. We are confronted with a whole new set of tasks, responsibilities, and challenges. This is a maiden voyage for us. We've never really been engaged in the electoral arena, and we've never really been engaged in the political struggle on this level before. So it's a challenge, but we're learning. We're learning every day, and what we're mainly learning is that it's the people that moves things. We've learned not to trust and not to depend on not only the politicians, but existing political structures. Somebody told us, well, CPAC may not be legal. It may be unconstitutional. We said, well, you don't understand what we're fighting for. We're not just fighting for legality and constitutionality. We're fighting for justice. So we don't give a damn whether it's legal or not. We're still going to fight for it. If you go by legality, then nobody never would have fought against slavery because it was legal, and so was Jim Crow. So we got a lot in front of us. We got a lot of hard work to do, and I think we're capable of doing it. I think we've done something that a lot of people didn't think could be done. We've brought back to life a national movement to defend the Black liberation movement at a time when it needs to be defended. And that is a hell of an accomplishment in and of itself. But we still got a lot of good grassroots work to do. And on that note, I want to end my comments.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you so much, comrade. This is an amazing accomplishment. And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say that I am so inspired by the work that you've accomplished. It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. We have a panelist, a group of, we have two people coming up next, Brother Gato Martinez Bentley and Max Rogo. But before we get to them, there are two questions in the Q&A file that I'd like just to ask you about, if you don't mind. The first question is from Karen. It says, many of us may end up in prison for organizing. How did you become a communist in prison? And in what ways do people conduct political education? So that was her first question. She has a second question, but why don't you answer the first question first?
Well, I met a communist in prison. Because he was he come out of the labor movement. He was a Teamster, and they had him in there for allegedly blowing up a truck. And he gave me. I was already fighting, and like I tell people, I didn't join the struggle. I was born in the struggle. So I was already in there fighting, and he noticed that, and so he said, this may help you, and he passed on some communist literature to me, and he passed on to me a magazine called Freedom Ways Magazine, which was founded by Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, and Esther Jackson. And at that time, there was a lot of restriction on our mail and stuff, and we had to smuggle stuff in and out. So I managed to smuggle a letter out to Freedom Ways, telling them how I admired their publication. And that opened up a relationship between me and that magazine that lasted all the way up until the time that I got out. But to answer your question specifically, I was fortunate enough to encounter some people in there who were political. Political people go to prison all the time, So that was fortunate. The other thing is I just applied myself, like Malcolm X applied himself, like George Jackson applied himself, like so many other thousands of guys in prison that and sisters that you may never hear about how they apply. Prison is a place where people get engaged in struggle. They're not just sitting. We're not just sitting up in there vegetating. And so I was fortunately one of those people, and it was during a time. It was during a historical period in which this country was on fire with struggle. I'm talking about the 60s. That's when I was in prison. I went in 61. I came out in 1976. And so that was a very fertile period. Panthers came in there while I was in there. You asked me, was I in the Panther Party? Well, I couldn't join them from prison because, that just wouldn't have worked. But they joined me in prison. So that worked. And then I formed a relationship with them that lasted up to this day, and so when I came home, I would go visit Panthers and all that who were in prison, like Geronimo Pratt, Deruba Ben Wahad. I went to see them while they were in prison. We had a movement. We had a movement above ground and underground. We had a movement, and we were determined to to fight the powers that be, to use Chuck D's expression. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that was perfect. And just two more questions, and then we'll let you go. The other question from Karen again is, many left groups endorse restorative justice for people who harm others. Do you support this, and would you apply that to police murders? And then the last question is, how does one go about joining CPAC?
What kind of justice did you say?
Restorative
justice.
Right.
Well, here, we believe in from the masses to the masses, and so what are Black people demanding? When I've been for over 50 years. I've been dealing with our people who have seen their children shot down in the streets and murdered, who've seen their sons and daughters tortured and sent to prison for stuff that they did not do. They're demanding justice. Meaning what? Meaning that they want the perpetrators, they want the people who did this to be brought to justice. Like we did with that killer cop here in Chicago, Jason Van Dyke. That's what they say. That's what they mean when they say justice. So with us, it starts right there. Now restorative justice for our people. Yeah, I mean, what are we restoring? We haven't got anything yet. We need to fight for justice. Which means we need the power to enforce the justice that we want to have. It can't be abstract. It can't be like just based on wishes and whatnot. We have to have the power to enforce. That's why we want community to control the police, because we know we will never get justice from them. We will never get justice from racist cops in our communities who occupy our communities and who murder us with impunity. That's why we need to have control. It's a question of power. We want the power to make it happen, and you can't get that without fighting for it.
Exactly. And the last question was, how do you join CPAC? Or how does one join?
Put your name and stuff right there in the chat box, and I'm sure the DC comrades will get a hold of you. Okay. And if they don't, we will. Yeah, it's easy to join. Go to our website, NAARPR.org, the national website, because I don't know where you're at in the country. We're a national organization now. So go to our national website, NAARPR.org, and you can join. You can join just like that.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I feel buoyed. I feel like you bring so much hope in your statements because you've been through the worst of it. I mean, they threw everything they could throw at you, and you're still on your feet. And that gives a lot of us an incredible amount of courage to continue to fight. So I'm just grateful that you decided to spend this time with us. Thank you so much. Power to the people. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to have a panel discussion. And we're going to have a panel discussion on the same issue about community control, Black community control of police with Gato Martinez-Bentley and Max Rameau. And let me just read their bios to you. So Max Rameau is a Haitian-born Pan-African theorist, campaign strategist, organizer, and author. While a student in the Washington, D.C. area, Max was introduced to Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist theory. After moving to Miami, Florida in 1991, he began organizing around a broad range of human rights issues impacting low-income Black communities, including immigrant rights, particularly Haitian immigrants, economic justice, LGBTQ rights, voting rights, particularly for ex-felons, and police abuse, among others. In October 2006, Take Back the Land seized control of a vacant lot in the Liberty City section of Miami and built the Umoja Village, a full urban shanty town addressing the issues of land, self-determination, and homelessness in the Black community. In October 2007, Take Back the Land initiated a bold campaign that sparked a national movement, liberating vacant, government-owned and foreclosed homes and moving homeless families into them. Max is an organizer with Pan-African Community Action and travels the country facilitating workshops, engaging in campaign strategy sessions, and developing models for community control over land and the human rights to housing. Max continues to develop movement theory and is currently working on a book on community control over police. And then Gato Martinez-Bentley is a native Washingtonian who is an integral part of the revolutionary socialist movement. He's a proud father of 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters. He's taught locally as well as internationally, working with children's theater and professional community collaborations for well over 30 years. He's a rebel with a cause. He believes in and teaches the importance of all history, including people of color. He's a Nubian warrior, Omic spirit. His accomplishments are being a teacher for more than 30 years, as well as being a conductor of a children's choir. He's an accomplished contract negotiator, organizer, and co-founder of Rosemont Child Care Workers Union, and the sole creator of Return to Salt of the Productions. He's a passionate believer for people's rights who began his activist journey at the tender age of 14. He's an accomplished, credited teacher, playwright, producer, director, actor, and social activist. He epitomizes what it means to be a griot, who fully embraces with meaning of keeping an oral history to educate and entertain with stories, poems, songs, dances, etc. Wow, this is going to be an amazing panel. So why don't we start? Why don't we start with Max, and then go on to Gato? So if you could perhaps give us a few minutes, Max, in terms of your positions and to start off the panel, and then we'll go to Gato.
Sure. Thank you so much. And let me just also reiterate and piggyback on your praise for the admiration and inspiration that I get from Frank Chapman. So I just really appreciate you, Comrade Frank. So my name is Max Ramon. I'm an organizer with Pan-African Community Action, or PACA, here in DC. And the way that we started our organization was tied directly to, or led us directly to the position of needing community control over police. On Halloween night, 2015, a 27-year-old teacher, beloved teacher in the DC area, went to go visit a friend at the Marbury Plaza, which is in Southeast Washington, DC, but never made it out from that visit. During that visit, men with uniforms and badges followed him, said they thought he was acting suspiciously, trapped him, hog-tied him, and basically suffocated him to death. And that was Alonzo Smith. And so Alonzo Smith never made it out of Marbury Plaza. What we soon came to find out, however, was that those men with badges and uniforms who legally was able to detain and handcuff Alonzo were law enforcement officers, but they were not police. They were what's called special police, which is a designation of law enforcement, is a licensed law enforcement person who does not work for the state. It was legal private police for this apartment building. If you go to Washington, D.C. and you go inside of Union Station, you can be stopped by law enforcement with guns and badges and uniforms, but those are not D.C. police. Those are private there police that are controlled and ordered by Union Station. Where the Amtrak is and a metro station is. The state, there are, I think it's 30 states, somewhere in the neighborhood, either just under or just above 30 states in the United States that allow for special police. The state of Virginia has over 40 police departments that are run out of people's homes, and the only police who are involved in that department is the person who lives in the home and is also the police and the chief and makes their own rules. So what we realized was that these apartment buildings, Union Station, some small neighborhoods, rural neighborhoods in Virginia, they have their own police. They're in control of their police. And what we realized very quickly is that we need to be in control of those who are going around our neighborhood. So how does some small town in Virginia with 30, 40 people in it get its own police, and they get to tell that police what to do? And the Black community has no one protecting us, has no one who is following our orders, and no one who's doing the things that we say need to be done. This raised an important issue for us, which actually in PACA is one of our central tools of analysis. The late great Kwame Ture said, "If a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. However, if a white man has the power to lynch me, that's my problem." Mm-hmm. The problem that we are facing as African people in this society is not racism, is not racial prejudice. It's not the attitudes or ideas that some white people hold. It's the fact that those people with those attitudes and ideas have power over our lives. And what we're really fighting for is not to change those attitudes and ideas from those white people who hold them. If you think about it, how would we even do that? What kind of campaign would we launch to change? Are we going to get millions of white people to volunteer to spend 10,000 hours on a psychiatrist's couch to try to unravel the white supremacy that they've been taught since they were children? How would we even win that? How would we measure that? What we really need to be fighting for is power, so that we make their ideas irrelevant. So for us, community control, what we needed then is community control over our land, community control over our education, community control over our resources, community control over those forces who are responsible for keeping us secure from outside threats, and to manage inside disputes. We need community control over police because we need power over those forces that are around our neighborhood and are given the right to stop us and to question us and to intervene in certain situations. I know there's a lot of talk these days about some other related demands, which, as Brother Frank mentioned, we don't think are antagonistic towards community control over police, but are not exact. One of the big ones that's getting a lot of attention now is the demand to defund. We think that there are several limitations to the demand to defund. One of them being is that if all of these big companies now have their own, are increasingly getting, but also have their own private police, and we defund the state-funded police, it doesn't mean if we win this campaign this week and the police departments are defunded on Friday, that on Monday, Walmart is going to go open up and say, oh, well, I guess there's no police. It means they're going to hire their own private police. And if we think police are doing a bad job now, that they're targeting us now, wait until they're no longer enforcing the laws of the state, but all they're doing is exactly what Walmart tells them to do. Right. So the private police then would become just as big of a problem. In addition, but even if you still wanted to go down that route, we understand that we cannot defund that which we do not control. Even if we wanted to get to defunding the police, community control over police is an absolute prerequisite to defunding, because we can't defund those things. We can't even get them to stop beating us up and to stop shooting us in the back. How are we going to get them to stop giving them money? So we need to first gain control. And once we have control, then we can make decisions about how we want to deploy them, or if we want to completely collapse them and shut them down. So PACA has had the campaign now for community control over police a little bit after the death of Alonzo Mourning, certainly since 2016, since the murder of Alonzo Smith, I'm sorry, since 2016. And the phase of the struggle in which we're in now is the community outreach phase. We are engaging our community in discussions in trying to reimagine what our communities could look like if we didn't have this oppressive force in us. Instead, if we had a force that was working on our behalf instead of working in order to contain us on behalf of some capitalists who don't even live or never come into our neighborhood, or who want to protect their property from us instead of making sure that we're okay. So we are in that phase. We want to go to the next phase and catch up to Chicago, catch up to the great work of the Chicago Alliance, and get community control over police on the ballot in Washington, D.C. in the upcoming years. And as was mentioned already, we are working and trying to finish the book now on community control over police, which I'm working on with my comrades, M. Adams and Nefra Freeman. So if you are interested in community control over police in DC, please visit PACA Power, PACA power.org, pacapower.org, and you can get more information there and join. Or of course, if you're not in DC, or if you're otherwise inclined, please visit the National Alliance, of which of course we're very proud members. We're, by the way, as we're our campaign and we're trying to figure out how to expand the campaign and grow it, we were ecstatic when we got news that there was a group out of Chicago that was relaunching the National Alliance, and that the centerpiece of that National Alliance would be community control over police. And we drove from Washington, D.C. to Chicago to participate in that process. And we're very moved and inspired at doing so. And we even then organizationally played a part in starting the DC chapter. So again, Max Ramo with Pan-African Community Action, and we are in full support of community control over the police.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask people to start dropping questions in the Q&A, or you can also, okay, sorry. I was going to ask people to start dropping questions in the Q&A, or you can also just send us a question in the chat room if you want to ask Max or Gato a question. So Gato, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I just want to give just a little background and texture to how I really got involved in this and the founding of the Claudia Jones School for Political Education. And the background is I was with an organization when I was younger, as a young person, called it was the YWLL. It was the Young Workers Liberation League here in DC. Actually, I was going to the headquarters of the Panther Party to get some of the Panther papers because two of the founders of the band EU Experience Unlimited was Charles Stevens and another brother, Malik Edwards, who did illustration on cartoons for the Panther Party paper. They organized us as band members and things like that all over in South Southeast and Highland, Valley Green, Condon Terrace, and all these areas over there as a band that would be similar to the bands in Oakland that was playing and doing concerts for the Panther Party. When I got up there, I see two of the guys, two of my comrades, Arturo Griffin and Jaime Cruz, and some others, guys were like plastering the walls. I said, I thought the Panther headquarters was here. They said, no, man, they had a shootout, and we have the building now, and we opened them for the Young Workers Liberation League. And you can go in there, because we're Marxists, and we got some things going in there. So I go in, and then I meet all these people that have been so really important and fundamental in this community in DC. And that started it for me in that way right there, that I got very involved at a young age. What happened to me in 1987, I was with three other friends. We were at a club called Cities, and it's on 18th Street off of Columbia Road and in the smoking area. And while I was sitting there, I see something pretty amazing. I'm sitting there and I see a cab pull up and several people want to get in the cab, but then the police car pulls behind them. And the officer got out of the car and he started harassing people, taking like their suitcases and throwing them and things like that. And but they got him in the car. They said, we're going to go. And the cab driver got out. He spoke very well how he said, listen, these people have a right to get in this. I'm going to write your ticket and everything. So unbeknownst to me, a guy comes up and he started speaking in Spanish. I had some knowledge of, the language Spanish. And what he was telling the officer was he had just got jumped. And when he used the word, he said he got jumped by dos morenos, which I interpret as two black guys. Jumped him, beat him up, took his wallet, and his face was all messed up pretty much. And the officer turned around to him, an officer of color turned around to him and told him, he used, I'll delete it, but he used a lot of profanity to the young man. And the guy was still saying, no, help me, you gotta help me. And the officer said, I'm gonna tell you one more effing time. If you don't give me a stand back, you're gonna feel something. And the guy didn't understand a whole lot of English, but some. And he said, I need help right away. I do. The officer turned around, unprovoked, and punched the guy straight in the face. And I mean, he hit him with power. So the guy went like this, then the officer started taking the back of his head and slamming his head on the patrol car. And so when he brings his face up the next time, I'm telling my friends, this is crazy. Y'all see this? It's a wild movie. Blood is all over his face. I don't know why I had to do it, but I did leave the restaurant and I asked the guy, could he give me a pen? And I said, officer, he was only asking you for help and assistance dealing with a robbery. He said, I'm gonna tell you the same effing thing I just told him. You need to back off. I said, I got a pen. Officer, can I get your badge number? And I'm looking down to write his badge number down. Before I even knew, he had punched me in the face like about 3 times. Then he starts to put a chokehold on me and try to throw me down. So I know a little martial art, so somehow I was able to kind of get out of the grab. He comes behind me, swings me down, and starts to do the same thing that officers had learned, like from Israel, that training of putting your knee on your neck and the whole thing. I was getting out of it, and it was like, my friends who testified with me said it was like 3 cars came immediately. Officers was jumping out the car, and they all started to stop me, kick me, beat me, basically torture. And I was out of work for 2 months. I had to wear a collar like this. When the patrol car came, or we called it paddy wagon back then, when they put me in there with the guy that was originally getting beat up or tortured by this officer, I spoke with him. I understood his Spanish. My Spanish is not great, but I understood him. And he said he was just trying to get help. And I said, I understood what you said. He said he's only in DC because he's at Quantico training to be an FBI agent. I said, oh, they beat up the wrong dude now. So when it came to trial, I won. I got compensated for it. The officer name was Walker. Now I'm just looking at a report recently on police using the firearm unnecessarily. I see in a long report, I see his name appear, that he had drew his weapon out on his on this lady, pulled the weapon out on her, and that made it, because he went off. It's one of these Glocks, he went off by accident. Now he didn't kill her or anything, but what happened is he got mentioned for that. Now, this Officer Walker has a notorious history. He was on NBC by the late Jim Vance was interviewing me, and he was on the show, and basically he had a list of like 7, basically, not just, beating people, but almost close to torture. He did ordain minister who came to assist somebody for help. And these are some of the things that I saw, and I traced it down, and realizing I was like, even then, we gotta get the change and get control over these police, because he's way out of control. It led me to several things, and that's one of them. I just want to, if I have just maybe a few minutes, and that I wrote down some things that, number one, there's an unbroken line of police violence in the United States that takes us all the way back to the days of slavery, the aftermath of slavery, the development of the Ku Klux Klan. And this is so much history of this racist violence that simply brings one person to justice and not bring another person to justice. It's going to be, we're going to have to disturb the whole racist office and sacrifice. That's Angela Davis. I wrote an article yet unpublished. It's called Crime and Punishment in the Nation's Colony. And basically, Crime and Punishment, despite the title, the novel written by Malakovich Dostoevsky was born in Moscow in 1821. It does not deal as much with crime and formal punishment, but the consciousness of the book is that you get to understand the thesis about alienation from society. So for me, Elizabethan England was split into 2 classes: the upper class, the nobility, and everyone else in society. So this is associated with the royalty and the high members of the clergy. Their most common crimes of nobility included high treason, blasphemy, sedition, spying, rebellion, murder, witchcraft, and alchemy. And I raised this point because of the foundation of the early U.S. police force was really made up of large segments of these Europeans from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and so forth and so on. The economics, quote unquote, the economics that drove the creation of the police force was centered on the preservation of slavery and the slave system. Number one, the primary police institutions was, as was said earlier, the slave patrols, which chasing down runaways and preventing slave revolts. They were always the first formal slave patrol created in the Carolinas in the 1700s, 1704 to be exact. And also during the Reconstruction, they was used through the local sheriff office to function as earlier slave patrols, enforcing segregation and the disenfranchisement of free slaves. So the democracy, American style, as they say, truer than the red, white, and blue, that's what that was. Economics that drove the creation of the police force was centered on the production, but not the protection of shipping interests, but in the preservation of slavery, capital motivation, capitalism. Government policy of white supremacy and racist oppression that goes all the way back before capitalism itself, the history, as a nation shows capitalism and slavery are especially linked hand in hand. Jim Crow extended the reign of terror on Black folks to keep millions of African Americans and Africans other than people of color trapped in poverty, ill-housed, ill-fed, poorly educated, brutalized by the police, and incarcerated at the highest rates in the world. All of this was not possible without this systemic structural racism, including the policy of racial exclusion and also racial profiling in the law enforcement, and private and public employment as well had this central place for this. So it was double, triple exploitation and repression. And so they had this three-tier of actually oppression, as Claudia Jones herself so eloquently voiced about the three stages of being oppressed as a woman, as being a woman of color, and being a worker. So to the Black folks in poverty and oppression, especially the working class, we look at this. I got to get this quote in because it was one of my mentors. He was in DC for a while, quote unquote. Analyze this, the growing movement for prison abolition and the characterizing and incarceration, that was a part of a large Black youth, put them in prison, that it was working people of color, and this was oppressive conditions. So he categorized it as a state of war on us. And that was by the late Jack Odell. So what I have is things I wanted to say real carefully. I'm not sure if I have the time, but number one, since the brutal police chokehold on Eric Garner in Staten Island and Michael Brown in Ferguson, a broad grassroots coalition, nationwide, anti-racist coalition, all organizing for Black victims and people who are yet not victims as myself of police misconduct, murder, and especially of unarmed people of color. They meaning us, we're demanding structural reforms, we're demanding all different areas so that we can take control of our communities. Black Life Matters, this is a new movement for somebody, I guess, my age, but the development of the nationwide movement, mainly initiated by African Americans, youth in Ferguson, has activated large numbers of people of all race, all over the nation and throughout the world. So very similar to like Occupy movement, we march in the streets, we march at night, we march throughout the day. And so right now, where we're in the state is now, I'll stop now and say that where we are right now, we're in a condition, a pre-revolutionary condition, so that we are already shown that we can organize the masses and millions, and that we can also, that, let's say this, I'm no longer accepting things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. That's Angela Davis. So, and I got to give out one more shout out for the Sister Comrade. There is an unbroken line, I already said that one. So I want to just kind of finish it real quickly in the fact that the Claudia Jones School for Political Education, we have been building for close to a year, 2 years, going on 2 years. And so we met and we saw the urgent need to make sure we put on programs like this and others, make sure people are supported in the movement, make sure that young folks in particularly know that I'm gonna ask them just like Sweetie Honey in the Rock, give your hands to the struggle, give your voices to the struggle, join this struggle. It's a righteous struggle, it's a struggle for justice. We need all our people to hear this message now. And we are going to move forward. Make no mistakes about it. We are going to move this forward, this struggle forward. My words, Bessie Ramos, forwards ever, backwards never. In here. Actually, I didn't hear you.
No, what I was saying was thank you so much. And the reality is that whether you get involved in the movement or you don't get involved in the movement, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be attacked by the police.
That's correct.
It's, you know, one has to make a decision about these things. I was, you know, the story that I would relate, and I'd ask people to please continue to put your questions in the Q&A, or just, you know, and, you know, you can just, you know, put it in the chat room. Was, you know, my daughter, for example, she's driving home from Howard University one evening, and all of a sudden, you know, she sees the police lights behind her, and it's at night. It's a night class. She pulls over, and the police actually. So I had trained my children, because I don't believe in being in denial around police. You have to train your children what to do when one of those occupiers walks up to your car. You have to train her. We have to train our children what to do when you are in harm's way. And so before he came to the car, she had already gotten her driver's license out. She pulled out her registration, and she was sitting there waiting for this this police officer, whatever, this occupier. I have to clean it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And he taps on her car with the butt of his gun. And this is a young Black girl in the car by herself at night. And this police officer taps on her car window with the butt of his gun, told her to, you know, to roll down her window. So my daughter rolls down her window. He takes his gun, turns it around, and puts it to her head.
Oh.
And he says, "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" So at that point, she must have been maybe 20 years old, 21. So she, you know, she becomes sort of unglued, and she's crying, and she's saying, you know, "I'm trying to get home. I'm just," and, you know, and so finally he removes the gun. And so he said, "Well, let me look at your license." So he does everything before he even looks at her license. He's already determined that she's a criminal. So when you made the statement about state of war, the answer is yes. We are in a state of war. Now we can be in denial. That's a decision that we make. We can make the decision that we want to live in denial, or we can make the decision that we're not going to live in denial anymore, that we're going to live in this world and we're going to do something about it. So I'd like just to thank both of you for this, for an incredible panel discussion, and for your wisdom that you're bringing to this issue. This is, look, in Maryland, 70%. I mean, we should have, every Black person should walk around with a little card, and you should make this your mantra. In Maryland, 70% of all the prisoners are Black. That means that we live in a slave state in Maryland. You have a situation where 25% of the population is Black, and 70% of the prison population is Black. I mean, how is that possible? That means that they've got so many innocent young boys and girls in the prison in Maryland. And so I don't know how any of us can sleep knowing that our neighbors are in jail right now for just breathing while they're Black. So are we in a state of war? We are in a state of war. So let me ask you a couple of questions, and then I'm sure we're going to get so many interesting chats on this one. The president, the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, made a comment the other day. He says he's warning Democrats against using a snappy slogan. He called it a snappy slogan like to fund the police. And so now he's jumped into this issue, basically warning Black people from being too, what is your assessment of, and I think you sort of hit on this a bit, about the defund the police as a slogan, as a compared to community control of the police, as a demand of the Black community. How do you compare these two?
That'd be a question for me.
Sure, either one.
Oh,
yeah. Why don't we start with you?
Well, it's kind of tricky for me in a way because I did work for the President Barack Obama's re-election campaign. Actually, I was one of the what you call I won like a President Drew hat cap to wear because I was making so much funds for that campaign. And now that I see what he has to say from the sidelines of the struggle, we're in this, like you said, we're in this war. We're in this class war. We're in this cultural race war in a way. And all these guys out there, Proud Boys with the Klan and all these other organizations that's coming out of the woodwork because of Trump. I would like to say to President Barack Obama, he needs to hold his rhetoric. If it's not going to be positive for the peoples of this nation, because this is an organized, united campaign going on throughout this nation, and wherever you go, you see all kind of people. I was someplace I saw there were like about 20 Japanese students, and they were hanging. They had flags and everything. I was like, man, this is wonderful to see this. Because the first demonstration I ever went to was the Great March on Washington. So from there to here, I'm like, I'm so happy about us getting to this level, at least making it to this level, where they say, you know, lift your voices up, lift your mighty voices up. That's what we're doing. For Barack Obama, I would like to say very kindly that I think if he's not going to come on in to help this situation, then he should continue to lead his life on the side.
You should stay retired.
You stay retired.
Okay, Max, what do you have to say?
I mean, I don't have much to say about the Obama thing. I think I think we are engaged in a class war, but we are engaged in that war on a different side of it than Barack Obama is. You don't get to be the head of empire and still be on the same side of the class war that most of us find ourselves. With that said, on the defund question, I think one of the challenges that the defund demand is having right now. Well, let me even take a step back. I think it is amazing and incredible that we've gone from a time just 4 years ago after the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, where the biggest, if you remember, we were struggling as a movement for a while to figure out what the demand actually should be around then and what should people be asking for it, and what ended up bubbling to the top, in addition to saying, you know, the magic words, Black Lives Matter, was cops should be wearing body cameras. And the idea that there was a time when there was a bit of an uproar in several cities when there were attempts to install cameras that would catch speeders, because that was intrusion of the state, and cameras downtown. And now the movement that was fighting against police brutality was demanding that police start wearing and the government start videotaping us 24 hours a day. This was really, really troubling. It was a backwards demand. It wasn't just one that was unclear or could have been sharper. It was an actual backwards demand. And that was just in 2014, 2015. So in five short years, we've gone from that to defund, which is at a minimum progressive demand, but could even be a radical demand. There are ways that could work. So I think just the fact that we're moving as a movement from government please spy on us all the time, to defund, I think is a huge step forward, and means that we're getting really close. In light speed, we're moving towards some actual real liberatory work here. With that said, I think one of the problems, the challenges with the call for defund is that it's not clear what people mean by defund. So the public policy use of the term of art defund means fund to zero, mean basically close down shop. Defund it and make it zero, which means it wouldn't exist anymore. But the way I think a lot of people are using it is defund is cut its budget by 20%, 40, 50%, and then use those funds elsewhere. So what's happening is a lot of people coming under this banner, and half the people think it means one thing, and the other half thinks it means something else. So if that campaign wins in whichever direction, half the people are going to be really angry because they didn't get what they want. If it gets funded to zero, the people who only wanted the budget to be cut 20% are going to be really upset that it got funded. And if it's funded to zero or 50%, the people who wanted it funded, if it's funded to 50% or 20%, the people who wanted it to zero are going to feel like they were sold out. That was too much of a compromise. So there has to be some clarity about what it actually means. With that said, we want power. We don't just want to reduce the amount of funding that their institutions get, although we do need to do that, and there's no doubt that police budgets are way over bloated. We want power, and we're not going to get power just by defunding them. In fact, in a certain configuration, private companies could get even more power. You could have these private security forces. This happens in many countries where wealthy neighborhoods are patrolled by private security, and they treat you way worse than the official police do in those countries. And I think we could head for that. So I think we just need some ideological and political struggle with our comrades so we can get to a place where we understand exactly what the demand is, and then we can move towards winning that. But I think community control over police is the one that's going to win in this time and in this moment.
And Frank, we've been joined by Frank. Frank, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, of course. Well, we need to stick to our guns. Number one is Barack Obama is not my leader. He's their leader. They I know black folks voted for him. In fact, I voted for him, but I didn't vote for him with the understanding that he was going to become the champion of black liberation. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So he's just doing what he does. But now I think Max made some very good points. I think everybody's made very good points. But I like to zero in on what Max was talking about, and that is, let's just clear this up. A slogan without a program ain't shit. It ain't nothing. So all defund is a slogan. The program is community control of the police. That's a program. That's a program of struggle. That's a program of action with definable political objectives. Defund is nebulous all over the goddamn map, and so depends on who grabs a hold of it. Whoever grabs a hold of it can make it what they want it to be. Obama grabs it, he makes it what he wants it to be. But you notice when the question of community control of the police came up during the presidential debates, you notice that they didn't mess with it. They didn't mess with it because they can't make that what they want it to be. It's clear and simple. Community control of the police. Black people need power in their communities with regard to policing. It's about power, and we can't let them divert us or distract us away from that major political objective with all of these tributaries and sidewaters, because that's defund the police. A lot of people in the movement who have the best of intentions have grabbed a hold of this. Okay, we're not trying to drive them out of the movement. We don't want to drive nobody out of the movement. So we just need to get, in terms of getting it clear, we need to get it clear with them. Look, this can't happen without community control. You know, if it's going to be some defunding, we want to be in control of it. Otherwise, you're playing into the neoliberal syndrome. You know, I mean, budget cuts, shifting budgets here, shifting. That, you know, that's neoliberalism. You know, that's what they've been doing all the time. You know, it becomes it ain't even a budget cut. It's a budget shift. You know, shift some money from this institution to another institution that claims it's serving the community, which may not even be serving the community either. You know, you get caught up in their cycle of bullshit. You know, and so the only way to stay out of that is for us to stay clear about what we're doing. We want power. You know, we want power. We are demanding power. We are fighting for power. We want the power, which is our democratic right to say who controls our communities in terms of the police and how our communities control. But it's also true whether we talk about banks, educational institutions, whatever we talk about, it's still about power, you know. And so we have to get on that trail, you know. And Cpac has a program. It sounds like you comrades in DC got a program, you know, in terms of how y'all gonna make this stuff happen, you know. And so we gotta, you know, we gotta stay engaged in what we're doing, and not get distracted off into some stuff that some other people are doing that really is a blind alley. You know, it's a blind alley. You know, here I'm gonna say this and be done with it. Here's how we judge reforms as to whether or not they contribute to the revolutionary process. Because I think a lot of us on this program tonight are revolutionaries. Does it change the power relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed? If it doesn't change power relationships between the oppressor and the oppressed, then you're just being recycled. You're just recycling the same old crap. You know, that's what you're doing. You know, so because that's what piecemeal reforms do. You know, they don't fundamentally, basically change nothing in terms of power relationships. They just keep you in the same circle. And so we're saying we want out of that circle. You know, we want to break that circle, and we want to create organizing space for our people to make some real changes, some real revolutionary changes. And that's why we're fighting the police. That's why we want community control of the police, for no other reason, you know, than to take power.
Yeah, all I can say to that is amen. This has been an incredible conversation. And we have maybe 10, 12 questions that we didn't get to. It just means that we have to do this again, I think, because this is obviously, this is a dialogue. It's not a lecture. And so it means that we have to continue to talk and figure out very, very complex political questions. And one of the ways that we can do that is by having folks in the DMV step forward and join the alliance. I started out by saying that the program today was a launch in the DMV for the National Alliance. And so we need for people to step forward, because I'm convinced that a lot of Black folks are in denial about what is going on. And we have to stop being in denial, because our jails are full of our sons and our neighbors and our friends, and we are not safe. And we need to sort of, we need to get in touch with the fact that the only way we're going to solve this is by struggling at a very concrete and material level to gain political power in this country. And so we need to have people step forward and to join the National Alliance, and for us to begin to engage in concrete struggle to stop the kind of repression and racism and white supremacy that's all built into capitalism in this country. And so if Dante is around, I'm going to throw it to Dante now, but I'm going to thank Max and Frank and Gato, and just tell you how much this discussion, I think, has meant to this community, to the DMV. We're so grateful that you took time out tonight to educate us and to help us think more clearly about these kinds of issues. So thank you very much on behalf of all your brothers and sisters here in this area. So Dante, let me throw it to you.
Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, we just want to say thank you to everyone who participated in this event, all the attendees. Appreciate all the comments in the chat. I want to thank our fantastic signer, ASL interpreter, Billy Sanders, who's been doing an outstanding job. Thank you so much for your work and dedication to the struggle as well. So I appreciate you. I want to thank Comrade Frank Chapman as well, calling in from Chicago. Appreciate all the work you do and the struggle that's happening with CPAC in Chicago. Max Rameau and the rest of the PACA folks, Quisha, Rashid, Netfa, all of you, Doc Matter, all of y'all, thank you so much for this wonderful event. And shout out to the DC Communist Party, Gato, Lucy, and the Joe Butler, Paul Robeson Club, also members of the Claudia Jones School for Political Education like myself. And, you know, we'll be having another event coming up in the next, hopefully, few months. And you know, continue this conversation. We want to bring folks into the National Alliance, the DC branch, if folks are calling in from the DMV area, Maryland, Virginia, DC proper, please email PACA and we'll get back to you for inviting you to a next meeting. And yeah, let's build power in this this region, and you know, let's fight for, you know, actual community control with teeth, you know. So yeah, if I missed anyone, I apologize. Rob as well, you're in the background with the tech support, with the YouTube live stream. Appreciate you, all the effort you do. And yeah, also, yeah, Dr. Marcia Coleman Adebayo, thank you so much for your work. And please check out what's happening with the desecration of the Moses African Cemetery in Bethesda. There's, yeah, basically a storage company that is desecrating you know, our ancestors that are in Bethesda. So please get involved with that struggle if you're living in Maryland or in DC as well. There's demonstrations, there's meetings, and we're fighting to preserve that area. So anyways, yeah, I want to thank everyone for being on the call. I don't really have many announcements. If PACA wants to drop, you know, donation link in the chat, we can drop one for the Claudia Jones School. I don't have any announcements for upcoming events, but if folks that are the panelists, if y'all want to have some like last final remarks to drop to the audience, feel free to unmute yourself and let folks know.
I just want to say I think this was a great program, and based on where correct ideas come from, revolutionary struggle, you know. So it was great. I really enjoyed it. Really glad, really honored to be a part of it. And keep it up, please. And also, can we get a link on the live stream?
Yeah, well, we can post it in the chat. I don't know, unless you just want to say it out loud. You talking about the National Alliance website, or?
I'm talking about this program.
Oh, yeah. It's on YouTube. So yeah, it'll be on YouTube. It'll be uploaded immediately. So.
Okay.
And I was going to say one more thing, but I just blanked out. Oh yeah, I do want to give a shout out to our ancestors that were organizing the DC Alliance before our time, Damu Smith and AC Bird. I do want to give a shout out to those two ancestors that were major organizers in the DC area that, yeah, folks on this call knew personally. So yeah, so I don't know, Max, do you want to have some last words, Gato?
Just thank you so much to the organizers of the event, and thank you everyone for attending, and fight for power.
I second that emotion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Much love. God bless.
Bye-bye.